Um, so let's jump back into Peterson, right? So anyway, so people like consider this guy like a benign scientist in some ways, and you originally when you wanted to do the show, you're like, this guy is like really malignant. So we're gonna get into like why this is, right? Why exactly his influence has been so malignant on society, and we actually have a few videos here that would illustrate kind of what he talks about, the kind of slates of hands that he's responsible for, and yeah, so let's do this a screen share. Peterson, he has this video, right? And this is a part of a channel called Motivation Thrive, right? And it's titled "The Truth," one of the greatest speeches ever, right? So before we even get to anything, right, to the extent that people could just kind of an over the top fashion sees some random person speaking that's going to have no kind of historical longevity and immediately assume one of the greatest speeches ever, that already is a problem. But let's just go through this bit by bit and see what he's like.
Foster Wallace isn't alive because there's another video. He gave a commencement speech at a college a year or two before he died, and it says the greatest speech ever.
Oh, maybe something like a speech on water or something. Maybe we should cover that sometime as well. But anyway, so this is Jordan B. Peterson, delivering what is supposed to be the greatest speech ever.
In order to find your way through all of that, you need to develop a relationship with something that's profound. And you have that capacity. And what could be more profound than the truth? And what would you rather have on your side? And to do more than your best, because your best isn't enough.
I mean, like, even so,
all the way through.
Yeah, like, I mean, even so far, right? He's saying that, to have a purpose in life, you need to, cultivate this relationship with the profound. I mean, look, I agree with that, right? And I'm sure that you agree with that yourself. But the fact is, most people will never be in that scenario, right? They're not going to be able to have, a deep and abiding relationship with art, a deep and abiding relationship with Nietzsche, a deep and abiding relationship with any, highfalutin thing that we could come up with. Only a few people do that. The rest, they need to find meaning elsewhere. It's not necessarily worse in the sense that, their lives are going to be like, less satisfying or whatever. But, it's a different kind of profundity that he doesn't give much attention to. And instead, he's kind of starts in this kind of like cultish fashion. He says, you need to cultivate a relationship with the truth, because what could be more profound than the truth? And the reason why it's such a silly cliche is, well, yes, I guess in some ways the truth could be profound, but the problem is everyone will be fighting about what is true and what isn't. The whole point of us taking on Peterson here is because we think that his spin on the truth is just that. It's spin. It's not actually true.
Before you start, let me just give you an example. On Facebook, I have one of my Facebook friends is an old manager of mine, an old boss. And I've been posting recently or sharing videos of cops. There's what's called First Amendment audit videos. I don't know if you ever heard of them, where when people are stopped, they have dash cams and they record all the bad shit cops do. And so this guy has been basically trolling my Facebook page for a while. And I after Jessica and Ethan and a few other people were upset about something, so I said, let me take care of him. And so I said to him, listen, because this old boss of mine says, why don't you put videos where cops do good things? I said, that's not the point. And then we got it. We sort of talked about things there, and I said, and he's like, he says, all of these people that the cops stop, basically, they need to buck up and work hard and do this. And he said, I've worked for everything I got. And I said, when you say I work for everything you've got, implicit in that is that other people don't. These people on the videos, black or white or Hispanic or what, don't. In the same way. And Jordan Peterson, I'll give him, is a lot smarter than my ex-boss in many things, I'm certain. But he is using the same low-born tactics that this non-academic ex-boss of mine is using. Implicit in what he's saying here is that, I have the way. I found the way. You got to do it my way. Instead of there being myriad roads to nirvana, you have to cultivate, a relationship with truth. Fuck truth. I'll stick with reality because, as I've said, truth is just a comment on reality. But someone like Peterson probably knows that. But again, he's selling snake oil deliberately because if you go there, how many views did that have? I'll bet you'd have had probably 5 million views minimum.
Yes, it's probably close. Yeah.
Yeah. He's acting.
Yeah,
right
almost
here.
1 million. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's less than I thought, but I'm sure there's probably over 1 billion views for Jordan Peterson, maybe 10 billion or whatnot. But my point is, he is clearly acting right here when he's talking. You see them. It reminds me. I've mentioned this before. When I went to see Donald Hall read poetry after his wife Jane Kenyon died in the late '80s, I went with a female friend of mine, and after about 10 minutes of Donald Hall reading the poems and then choking up whatnot, I said to her, I whispered, I said, he's acting. I said, watch. And I said, I'll squeeze your arm. And within 5 seconds, he's going to tear up again every time he does. I squeezed her arm about 20 times because I knew a bump, that Hall was using his dead wife to sell this book of his. He's acting in much the same way. And if I was there and you and I were in the audience and I was squeezing your wrist, you'd probably have a black and blue mark of all the times he's hitting these same notes. This is very studied. This is very deliberate. This is acting. He is acting. He's a good actor. He's obviously a better actor than you or I could be because, I don't have that many, I couldn't get gone that many hits and I'd say a lot wiser things than he's saying.
Yeah, remember the video of him? Like he does a lot of crying, right? A video literally crying about the idea of Western civilization. It's so. Anyway, let's just continue with this video.
Because your best isn't as good as you could be. You have to push yourself past that, and that's, as far as I can tell, where you find what you need in life. You find the meaning that sustains you in life. It's
Oprah for white guys, right? This is like Oprah for lonely white guys, right?
Action that redeems.
And what do we need? We need an attractive young blonde woman.
Yeah. Well, this is the guy that's like putting together a video.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. But it gets to the
but that's the idea, right? That's
this is what the people who think he's smart and a genius. This is what they want. They want to be able to regurge what he's saying to impress this white girl to get her in the sack with them.
World.
Go ahead.
Nietzsche said that you could tell much about a man's character by how much truth he could tolerate, which is very interesting. There's
and they want to be this guy, right? They're like, they want to be thoughtful and philosophical.
This guy reminds me of that old Shania Twain video of the guy taking a shower.
She's listening through the truth. And I believe that to be the case because I don't think that you can manifest who you are without the truth. And so I think it's literally and metaphorically truth, that the pathway to who you could be if you were completely who you were is through
into the light,
the truth. And so the truth does set you free, but the problem is that it destroys everything that isn't worthy in you as it sets you free.
Isn't it just kind of ironic how like he's doing this video on truth and authenticity, and yet we prefaced everything by talking in detail about his like years and years of audience capture and acting, right? That's literally like what he's doing, and yet this is a video about authenticity. It's just insane.
And I know Peterson himself to make the video, but this goes to the mindset of his audience. Again, a beautiful young blonde, a brunette. First we had a blonde, now we have a brunette. Because all of these kinds of things are going to help you get. I mean, this is Madison Avenue, and he's speaking in Madman speak.
Yeah. And another reason why probably you have, at this point, like 50-50 collection of like men and women is realistically, I would be shocked if more than, if his audience is not, any less than something like 98% men. Right. So women aren't interested in this kind of shit.
And that's a process of burning, and it's painful. Because you cling to what you shouldn't be.
I will give him props. He did pronounce Nietzsche correctly.
Partly out of
laziness. Nietzsche, but it's Nietzsche.
And so then you encounter something true. And you all know this. You all know this perfectly well. Because when was the last time that you learned something important that wasn't a blow? of some sort, you know, and it's often you look back at your life and you think, oh God, I really learned something there. I wouldn't want to do that again, but it really changed my life. I mean, sometimes it can really destroy you, you know, an encounter with the truth, and you never really recover. But now and then something comes along and straightens you out, and a lot of you has to go.
Another irony, like going into his personal life, right? I don't want to be like, you know, insensitive here, but he did develop a drug habit. And the reason why I think it's perfectly okay to go there is he developed a drug habit. And after this became clear to everyone that this was in fact the case, you would have his daughter who runs her own podcast and you know, like people that, you know, sort of were like spokesmen for him. They would say like, by the way, this is not a drug addiction. This is like something else entirely. He's not even able to concede. Like he has been so dishonest with his audience for years and years that when actually something profound, let's call it profound, does happen to him, which is like almost dying in a Russian hospital somewhere due to all of this, he's not even able to accurately and honestly relay the information and how this like affects him in a way that would be useful to his audience, actually useful to his audience. He's not able to talk about the fact that he has an addiction. Guess what? Lots of people have addictions. They have addictions, even if they're not necessarily chemical addictions. There's certain behaviors that certain people just cannot stop. He's not able to talk about that because he's spent such a long time building this facade for himself that, you know, now that this video, like, I'm not sure exactly when it was made, but, you know, it's just so ironic given everything that has transpired since.
Yeah, I know next to nothing about his personal life. Is he married?
He's married, and the addiction had to do with like some drugs he was taking because his wife had cancer and he couldn't cope with it. I'm not sure if she's still living or she died, but you know, so like, I mean, it's perfectly understandable. Like there should not be any kind of shame in that. And yet, because he has spent such a long time talking about pick yourself up by the bootstraps, like using this term, which started, of course, as a sarcastic phrase for Mark Twain, you know, using terminology like that, always try your best. Like in this video, your best is not good enough. He's not able to honestly deal with these problems in a way that truly would be useful to his audience, that he claims to, you know, I want to protect young men. I want to give them a purpose. I want to give them a direction. Well, how about you share, you know, actual experiences in a way where you're not just faking your way through it?
A lot of you have
how about non-white young men?
And I suppose in some sense,
that's not going to happen.
Is that everything about you that isn't worthy is to be put into the flames, and that's another reason to be not so casual about claiming what you believe, because it isn't.
My cliche meter here is out of about two and a half dozen, maybe 25,
you know, 30. I learned when I was a kid,
cliched and hypocritical. It's crazy.
Little older,
and we're less than 3 minutes in. So
almost everything that I said was one form of lie or another, and I wasn't any worse, I would say, than the people that I was associating with.
That's the young Peterson.
And
that's
the lies were manifold. You know, they were attempts to win arguments for the sake of winning the argument. That might be one. Attempts to indicate my intellectual prowess when there were competitions of that sort, maybe just the sheer pleasure of engaging in an intellectual argument and winning.
And the crazy thing about this part is, like, I mean, think about what he's doing. Like put yourself into like the mind of a cult leader or a guru of some sort. He's saying, you know what, guys? I used to have all these flaws within myself when I was a child, right? He creates all this like artificial distance between himself today and himself as a child. And he's basically saying that, you know, I don't have all these problems any longer. I put away these things when I was a teenager, or maybe like by the time I finished college or whatever it was. And now I am here to give you the way, right?
This reminds me of some of the early videos you'll watch from the 50s or 60s from Ayn Rand. She's another one. Yeah. I purged myself.
We could have done that too.
Flaw. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah. Again, like all this kind of, you know, this is such guru speak, and he's doing such a disservice to the people that he claims to want to help, right? Creating all this artificial distance. And we know for a fact that all these things that he's talking about as if it's in his past, they apply, I would bet, much more so to the present Jordan Peterson than to the Peterson of 30 years ago. And that's just a fact.
It actually
my
reminds me of a lot
inability
of
to
what
distinguish between ideas that I had read and incorporated because I had read, but hadn't realized that I hadn't yet earned the right to use all of that. And, you know, I had this experience that lasted a long time. Well, I would say it's really never gone away. And I think this was the awakening of my conscience, essentially. This voice, for lack of a better word,
he's sticking pretty well to this 7 or 8 cliches a minute.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Again, all the people, I mean,
like I can't do that. I can't do that because I actually speak what comes to my mind. I give me a script, I'll be off script within 20 seconds.
And that's the thing. Like
he's got a great memory. I'll give him that. He knows.
I'm positive that there's tons of people in his audience that wouldn't give the time of day to an Oprah. And despite like substantively getting someone exactly like Oprah, just as, you know, just as like callous, right? Just as manipulative, just as money hungry, right? As Oprah, and put like a different skin color, put a different gender, a different country on him, a different set of cliches, right? And they're not able to tell the difference. Like it really is incredible.
So,
well, it's a different set of cliches to a degree.
Yeah. Cosmetically, you know, cosmetically, it's a different set of cliche.
That's Oprah speak right there. What's on the screen right now?
Yeah.
Inside me, and it said every time I said something that wasn't true, and that's usually what it said. That's not true. You don't believe that. Or there was a sensation that was associated with it. I don't think this is that uncommon. You know, I asked my psychology classes for many years in a row if they had an experience, that they had a voice in their head, let's say, it's a metaphor, or a feeling that communicated to them when they were about to do something wrong. And it was universally the case that people agreed with one of those statements or another. And the other thing I would ask is, well, do you always listen to it? And of course, the answer to that was definitely no. Well, you know, I learned that so much of what I was doing was false. And I think I learned this. See, there's a reason that this came to me so clearly. I was trying to understand why people did terrible things. And I was really concentrating on the terrible, terrible things that people do. And I was interested in...
We're all against murder. We're all against genocide.
For example. And not as a political phenomenon, but as a psychological phenomenon.
There's actually a video that goes, Jordan Peterson tells why Hitler was worse than you thought.
Yeah.
Who the fuck it's titled that? It's like really?
This reminds me of Norman Finkelstein when he said he quoted Elie Wiesel when Wiesel was like, you know what? I thought the Nazis were bad, but I didn't think they were this bad. They even tried to take money from Jews and steal their, you know, private property. You know, it's like, okay. But this part is
because grand theft doesn't compare with murder, mass murder.
And this part is interesting, right? So like he starts talking about how, you know, he always like brings up like, you know, authoritarians
how could you be like an Auschwitz god? Listen to Silas, listen to bad advice like you're giving. That's the very way. And I'm not saying that Peterson himself has aspirations to be a Hitler or anything, but if you want to know how people can get led astray, just listen to pablum like this.
And this part is interesting because he will try, you will notice, he will try to completely divorce any kind of material reality for like, well, how does someone become an Auschwitz guard? You know, from, you know, actually what happens, right? And he's trying to like idealize it in the sense where like he becomes like really obsessed with, well, how could I prevent myself? How could I prevent myself from ever being that way? Just listen to this part.
How you could be an Auschwitz guard. And I wasn't really curious about how you could be one because, well, you could be one, that, of course. I was more curious about how I could be one, being such a good person as I thought I was. But I also knew that many people did many terrible things during the 20th century. And the idea that I was somehow better than them, or that I should assume a priori that I was better than them and that I wouldn't have made the same choices or worse had I been in the same situation, was a very, very, very dangerous supposition. and that we really needed to understand why it happened, and that perhaps we could go deep enough in that understanding, which is, I think, what happens when you go deep into understanding, so that you could stop it. Because if you understand the problem,
yeah,
you
exactly,
can solve it. And at least in part,
and if you solve it, you have solved your problem. That's what the solution is.
Yeah. Essentially, he says something like, "Don't be that way." How did that be a Nazi guard? Don't be that way. I think that's a verbatim quote. Let's see if it's verbatim.
The problem was, as Solzhenitsyn said, that the problem is that the line between good and evil runs down every human heart. And I was reading Jung at the same time, and he believed that the human soul was a tree whose roots grew all the way to hell.
This isn't big words throwing around.
In the full
names throwing around.
Investigation of the shadow, which was
another blonde girl.
The human psyche.
Don't you just want to kiss those lips?
It was bottomless, essentally.
I have to have
it was
her.
like an experience of hell.
Look at her.
And
it's a romance book.
Also struck me as
he's the Fabio of academia.
The way to stop those sorts of things from happening was to stop yourself from being the sort of person who would do it.
Isn't that incredible? That's like the solution to genocide. Think about it. That is the solution to genocide. Just don't do it, guys. Don't do it. Like there's and that's the thing. Like his entire philosophy, as we'll see, like in later videos when he's talking about poverty and stuff like that, is so divorced from any kind of like deeper material reality. Like if you want to go back in time, right, and think about, well, how could we have prevented, Nazi Germany from rising in power? Well, one of the things that you could have done is you could have prohibited corporations from doing business with these people. I remember reading like a book on Nazi German by Stefan Zweig. And he was like, one thing that I noticed that was incredible was little by little, Nazi Germany became just larger and larger. We started seeing all these trucks on the street that we knew that we couldn't afford previously. What's going on? And this money had to have come from somewhere. It did not come from Germany itself. It was coming in externally. What is going on there? And we do the same things now, right?
Family.
We arm Saudi Arabia because it's an ally. We arm Israel because it's an ally. We arm all kinds of dictatorships. We do essentially the same things materially that have functionally the same effect as a genocide would, even if technically some of these things don't rise to the level of genocide. The suffering is more or less similar. So there's no level of analysis like that in anything that he's saying, much less like, okay, going back to like the Versailles Treaty, like he's not ever going to go there. For him, history moves according to personal individual choices that people make, and not a mass of human choices in a mass human probability space that will tend to play out similarly again and again and again and again, as long as the variables remain the same, right? He's completely allergic to this kind of analysis.
Now, here's the thing. He didn't make the video, Peterson. I'm not going to claim he did. But the images that are being inserted in between his bone mows here are done by his fan. Obviously, a fan did that. This is what the fan is getting. Look at the images. Sex and death. It's like a Woody Allen farce here, because we first get these comely girls. Here we have had about, I guess it was maybe 12, 15 seconds of focusing on an attractive young female's lips. All the girl needed to do was part or stick her tongue out, and it couldn't have been more blatant. And then we get the images of the Holocaust, sex and death, sex and death. This must be deep here, because this is what is going on. And whoever made this video, whatever young male probably made this video, and this is the kind of black and white, simplistic kind of stupidity that is generated by the people that listen to this guy and think this guy is intelligent, think he's deep, think he's saying something. I mean, we're now here a little over 7 minutes in. There had to be close to 50 cliches here.
Yeah. Let's just go through like the next 5, like without stopping, and then just like digest what happens.
Who would even start to do it? Because the other thing you learn when you learn about atrocities of that sort, for me, it was a matter of understanding that the way to stop such things from happening, the way to remember properly, is to understand that you could do it, that you could do those terrible things, because the people who did them were like you, and that the way out of that is to stop being like that.
What the fuck?
And the way you stop being like that is by ceasing to tell yourself lies that you don't believe in and that you know you shouldn't act
believe in
out.
my lies.
Oh my God.
You know, and that's made a huge difference in my life, for better or for worse. I mean, it was very uncanny experience, I would say, because it's very discombobulating to experience yourself as fragmented enough so that much of what you do and say is actually
Light in
false.
the darkness.
It's a lot of work to clean that up. A lot. But
just take a
the
white.
consequences are, in principle, worthwhile. And so that was part of what,
Jesus Christ
what drove
pose.
me towards clinical psychology,
Look at that.
staying away from
Look at that, literally.
Minus the music, minus the great music.
law and from politics in general, because I started to believe that, and I think this is the great Western idea, the proper route forward for the redemption of the individual and for mankind as a whole is
Redeemer.
as a consequence of the redemption of each individual. And I truly
The guy
believe
who
that.
made this is
And I
his new
believe that
Christ.
that occurs as a consequence of
Another
adherence
comely
to the
young
truth
woman.
and courage in
Jesus,
the face of
Jordan,
being. That's
starts
rule
with
one,
J,
right?
must be a
Stand up
connection.
straight with your shoulders back, is to take on the onslaught and to enter the
Day
contentious
fixate
ring
of a young
and to
Peterson.
do more than.
Have all these people been white so far? I've just noticed that. Are they all of them
Yes.
white? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you asked me about, I've never really been into white blonde girls. So like maybe if they had some other types, I would be more into
Let's
them.
get some booty.
Because your best isn't enough. Because your best isn't as good as you could be. You have to push yourself past that. And that's, as far as I can tell, where you find what
This
you
is from
need
the
in
Gene
life.
Hackman movie,
You
Hoosiers,
find the
about a
meaning
college
that
basketball
sustains
team.
you in life, and you find the patterns of action that redeem the world, both at the same time.
Again, you
And
come with
life
young
is a very
woman,
difficult business.
white.
You know, it's fatal, and it's full of suffering, and it's
Another. Well, now we're
and
getting
it's
a
full
little
of
young. Too young.
betrayal and malevolence. There's nothing about it that's trivial. It's all profound. And in order to find
Another
your
15,
way
16-year-old
through
girl.
all of that capacity for hellish experience, let's say,
Burning match tip.
you need to develop a relationship with something that's profound. And you can. You have that
Behind your
capacity.
video.
And what could be more profound than the truth? And what would you rather have on your
Reality.
side? And you might say, well, that's
Reality.
obvious. And of course, everyone should do that. And then you need to know why you don't. And the answer is, well, the burns are still healing. It's like, well, there's no shortage of deadwood to burn off. And there's no shortage of pain when the deadwood burns off. And that's what makes people afraid of the truth. And so
That guy was in a Holocaust suit.
what's the decision that you make? You decide to believe. It's a risk, an existential
That's a Nazi
risk.
guard
It's an act of faith.
stomping his boots.
You believe that the truth can set you free. You believe that people have an intrinsic divinity about
This
their
looks like
soul.
Baron von Munchausen.
You decide
out
that
to
you're
Kiev
going to live in
from
that
outside,
manner
up
and
in
that
the
you're going to
clouds.
let everything about yourself that isn't worthy of that goal die. And that might be almost everything that you are. And that's a
Whoever
terrible
made this
thing to
video is
contemplate.
ironically just
The only thing that's worse,
This is such a
I would say,
poorly
is
thought out
the
set
alternative.
of images. But
Because the
Yeah.
alternative is the sorts of hells.
slam it.
Well, it's actually extremely well thought out in terms of getting people to like, getting people to subscribe, getting people from his audience interested in your channel, right? It's a perfect set of images for that, right? So we have to think like a businessman if we want to approach the whys and wherefores of JBP.
Maybe I should get a couple of porno star females to do some lesbian 69ing as intros to my video. I get a lot more hits, I'm sure.
If you notice in some of your videos, like how to write a sex scene with like a picture of like a half naked lady or whatever, that those tend to get like 50,000 views.
We managed to produce around us and that we produced with particular expertise during the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. And it would be a good thing if we decided collectively and individually not to
Push
go
it
back
down.
there
Come on, go.
again.
Dramatic. He's going to do this by the end of the video.
Thank
Watch.
you.
He's gonna push it down. There he does. Tell me that this was not scripted, that he didn't have a plan for doing it. Look at the way he's looking down there. I mean, he's better than Donald Hall ever was. Look at that. There we go. He looks like a Catholic priest who just molested a choir boy and now has got to go out and give the sermon. Hey.
Yeah, so I mean, like, this is again like Oprah level shit. You just switch the skin color, some of the assumptions, but substantively it's all the same garbage, right? It's all the same greed, it's all the same nonsense.
And I don't see how you can say he's not a malignant narcissist, because the video is evidence of the shallow sort of thinking that of the people he's trying to reach. That video is a display of the malignance that propagates in the people who take him seriously are capable of.
I mean, like, we're talking about how to prevent genocide, and it amounts to little more than A, don't be like that, and B, why don't you just not tell yourself lies? Like, do you think Hitler was like thinking that he was lying to himself? Like, is that really? It's just so silly.
And if you purge yourself of genocidal thoughts, there'll be a comely young 20-something blonde girl who'll be ready to fuck you and suck you.
Yeah,
at the end
again, it's like, if we could just collectively come together and decide, well, no fucking shit. Like, is that anyway?